Hi, I will be talking on the second major skill needed for this course, and that is on the concept of hope. So here we'll be talking about hope enhancement skill, and that will serve as our body three. And this will carry us through strategies to enhance hope, inspiring resilience, and optimism across culture. In this segment, we shall be looking at the following: why hope in trauma? What are the common expressions of hope when somebody is going through trauma? What is the scientific understanding of hope, and how can we enhance hope scientifically? To start with, why hope? In psychotrauma, the story of trauma dominates, and the story of trauma that dominates is about losing hope, or it's about losing the sense of the possibility of a better future. So, yeah, hope serves as the antidote that to help cushion and reverse most of the sufferings that we go through in psychological trauma. And that is why the recovery story, in its earliest, rawest form, is about hope. And it is not about naive optimism, but the capacity to see a path forward and walk the path. To be a hope detective, that's part of why we have to know about hope. And by doing that, it helps us to learn how to identify it, validate it, and amplify that for the client's existing expressions of hope, no matter how small it may be. And to be a hope detective is for us to be able to have the ability to recognize the common expressions of hope. And that is by recognizing some of the following. In our day to day usual talk, in trauma or otherwise, these are some of the ways that hope might be when we talk about the next step. And in the next step, we are essentially referring to open action, where the focus is on the immediate, manageable next action. And here, the one of the things to ask, what is the one smallest thing you can take to care for yourself right now? And that help the individual to know, oh, we are talking about hope. Another thing to look at is about holding on or stubborn refusal. When we see this in the expression or in the way the individual we're interacting with talks and deal with it, it's telling us a powerful, gritty form of hope. And it's telling us that this way to validate and reframe our hope. And that way we can let them appreciate that you are calling this just getting by. But I see it as a profound act of strength and refusal to be defeated. And such expression, we are helping them to take note that yes, despite the common loss of hope that is there in the story of trauma, the individual is still holding on to hope in his own, our own way. Another thing we can look at is the concept of crying for hope, where there is tears and release and a plea, creating space for change. And this is one of those things we can use to normalize and interpret the event, the understanding, the meaning of that event for that individual. And that's why it can come as sometimes our tears are how our body asks for the help our mind isn't ready to put into words. And that way, the individual will know we need to talk about the trauma story. We need to look about the mind in trauma, the different pattern of how the mind puts trauma to us in the interpretation of it, which are the cognitive interpretation of traumatic suffering in the mind. Another expression will be borrowed hope, where the client will leverages the belief of, and this can be offered explicitly as it's okay if you can't see the light yet. For now, you can borrow my hope and believe in your ability to heal. And here we're trying to let them see that even if they still don't believe in themselves, but that they are with us as the therapist, as the one trying to offer, we can tell them that yes, we can all work together. And I'm optimistic that they will get to it. And that optimism from me, that hope that I have, they can borrow it also from me. And we can start sharing that and they will start developing and growing there in the process. Another expression that or more expression that we may do is when something comes like a flicker of light. For example, people might have fleeting positive thoughts and which they may not usually try to dwell upon because they dwell more in their mind, they think more, they ruminate more, or brooding on the negativity, rather than to see that some of the fleeting positive thoughts that come also needs to be recognized. And here we want them to be able to note them in the interaction so that we can note them for that make it. And it may come like that maybe you just mentioned. Let's stay with that for a moment. What would that maybe look like? Because such statement is still telling that the individual is still holding up to hope in a way, and we need to help them see it rather than just let it pass by. And with that, so we let them see it, that's by identify it. We help them to validate it so that they can live it, and that way they will start taking note of those positive that are there, rather than dwelling on the suffering. Reaching out is another way that we might express hope, and that's the act of attending the session in itself is a profound expression of hope. And we highlight this for them in several ways. For example, you can say you took a very courageous step just by being here today. What was the hope that motivated you to come? And that way they start seeing that, oh, actually they've not lose all the hope. The hope is still there, but only that they can't just dwell more upon it, unlike before the traumatic event occur. And this will help them to know that their ability to ask for help is also about hope. And when they use statement like and yet, then we also help them to look at this and be able to appreciate that. And this help to see that the qualifying clause that challenges despair is what they are using. And this way we can mirror and amplify with them. For example, you can say, I heard that. After listing all the pain, that pain, you said, and yet I'm still trying. That and yet is incredibly important. And by bringing that for them, helping them to note it in their statement, we are letting them know there is hope and you are living hopeful and you can do a lot to improve the hope. Another thing to look at in the expression of hope is openness to surprise. Hope in uncertainty is difficult that people might say no because I'm not sure what will happen. I don't need to be hopeful about it. And that's how some people might come and say they don't believe in the concept of hope. But that there is the belief of the possibility of a better future. That is very important. And we utilize that to help challenge the lack of belief in the certainty, in the uncertainty of what the future is, and that hope will still be in that uncertainty. And that will help them realize that they should be open, that surprise will come, and that surprise will come. And it can come like this that since the future is unknown and your past predictions have been colored by pain, is it possible the future could also hold some unexpected relief? And this is very vital because there are many trauma stories, but there's also in that trauma story, belief story that we often gloss over, that we don't take cognizance of. So here, I want us to pause and take a minute for each in our own way before we continue. And based on what we have just covered, let's take a look and see what are the common expressions of hope we might have encountered in our interaction with people that surround us, either significant people in our lives, parents, spouse, brother, sister, children, may look at that. Or other encounter, maybe in our clinical practice or in our occupational space. So we might need to look at that and try to see what are the way people have tried to demonstrate hope for us. And that is by looking what are the way that the expression they make shows that they are crying for hope. And what are the way that the expression they make shows that they are holding on to hope. So please let's take a minute to look at what are the expression we can remember and we can put them just in brief space. And what are the expression they will talk about that can show that, oh, this individual is holding on to hope. Thank you. You can pause the video here and do this exercise. Then you continue the video next. If what you have gathered sounds like this, then you are on the right path and you started taking note of how people in suffering try to express hope. And when people are crying for hope as an expression of hope, they may bring things like, I'm tired with life. I feel doomed. I feel helpless. I feel worthless? Or is there going to be an end to this suffering? Is there no one to help? When will I get better? I don't think I will make it again in life. It's all over. All these are telling us somebody that didn't do that express, it doesn't mean they lose hope, but it's telling you that they still hold on to the hope. I mean, they are crying that there is challenges with hope, but they are crying that this hope should come back. And this is telling us the story of the suffering they're going through, of how the effect they have lost hope. There may be other expression they will also there that we need to take note, and that is in the encounter. And if the encounter sounds like I leave it in the hands of God, then he's telling us that yeah, they are still holding on to hope. It's well, inshallah. I will adhere to what people said. It will end one day. I will come out of it. Especially like this, see that they are holding on to hope. They are not just crying for hope, but they are also holding on to hope. So please, that's the essence of the exercise we do. And we can check what our responses are and compare it to responses like that and see if we are on the right stand. And from this, we'll go to one of the other parts of what we need to do. And that is, what is scientific understanding of hope? Scientifically, there are many ways we have tried to express hope, from false proclamation of hope to the scientific model of hope. And that's what this slide is trying to show us. And false hope abounds where we have so many motivational speakers, so many charlatan counselors, that they all come with false hope. And all they give us an unrealistic expectation that something will happen without a solid basis, often leading to disappointment. And this abounds in our experience. There are people that give us what hope is realistic hope. And this realistic hope also very close to what the scientific model of hope is. Because they are grounded expectation based on practical possibilities and evidence. And this is very vital to take note. Then there's also the utopian hope that people might look at. And this is having an idealistic vision of a perfect vision, often seen as unattainable for most people. So we need to be careful of how we use the utopian hope because it can stop us from doing the needful in the present to see that we can boost the hope and reduce the suffering while we might not lose focus of that utopian hope. Then there's also the concept of the chosen hope. And this is about our deliberate decision to maintain hope despite challenges. And this is very vital. It is part of what is needed when we look at the scientific model of hope. Then, in the existential understanding of hope, hope is looked at as things that are tied to finding meaning or purpose in life, especially in difficult circumstances. And this helps us to give us a leap into what is scientific and into what is spiritual yearning that hope as a concept lies with. And that is where hope there in this existential realm, we talk about the patient hope, the generalized hope, and the universal hope. And the patient hope is talking about a calm, enduring hope that waits for the right time or outcome. The individual learn what patience is. That this hope I have, I know it needs time to mature, and I need to nurture it so that it can grow and now bring the outcome I'm look for. So I will not just have the false hope and do nothing, but I have a patient hope so that I need to nurture it to grow. Then there's also the concept of the generalizer, which is a broad, not specific optimism about life or the future. This can be challenging because in this concept that if you can't have a patient hope, you can't have a choosing hope, you can't make it realistic, then it may be difficult to generalize to other aspects of life. And this is essential that as we grow this, it's telling us that yes, life is meaningful, life has a purpose, and our spiritual growth is there. And as we keep growing, we should be able to generalize it to move it to other aspects of living so that we can move. And also the concept of universal hope, where we believe all shared the hope, and the hope that all shared is beyond everybody. It transcends individual concern and often encompassing all humanity. And this is where spirituality often abounds. This spiritual realm is often is. and why people might look at it from that spiritual perspective, or they might look at it from no spiritual perspective. But it's talking in that realm that is there, is more than just religiosity, and it's telling us about achieving the goal of religiosity. And that universal is helpful, help us to be able to transcend that this too will end, and there is a meaning and purpose attached to it. Even if I can't get the meaning now, I should still be able to live and move forward. Then we also look at the transcendental hope, the essence, which is what the universal hope is trying to look at. And this is telling us about the deep spiritual or beyond the ordinary hope that connects to the higher meaning of existence, where people talk about the higher power, where people talk about the supreme being, where people will talk about God or talk about Allah, and how that concept will help them to keep living and transcend, and help them to appreciate what it is to bring about rising up and live and be able to have a purpose and meaning in life. And the scientific viewpoint will look at it, that hope as a concept that have at least three core components. But we'll come to see that there is a fourth component which is vital for us to understand the concept of hope. So please let's take a moment to listen to this video and make our understanding
The
better.
purpose of this video is to help you reach the future that you desire. You will learn some key insights from research in positive psychology that will help you overcome obstacles and develop your full potential. The psychologist Professor Rick Snyder developed hope theory and stated that hope consists of three components: goals, pathways, and agency. He discovered that hopeful people develop many pathways to reach their goals because they anticipate obstacles and don't expect things to be easy. They have high levels of agency. That means they persist and sustain their motivation to move towards their goals. They're energized and come up with new and different plans to overcome obstacles. Okay, let's get started. Here is how you can use hope theory to make your life better. What is a goal that you want to work on? Make it specific, measurable, and set a deadline so that you know when you reached your goal. Write your goal down. How would you feel if you reached this goal? Make sure it's something that you care about. Let's develop a pathway. How will you reach your goal? Write a pathway down. Often pathways consist of different sub-goals. Hopeful people develop a variety of pathways to be more flexible. Can you think of a different pathway? What is your plan B? What is your plan C? What is your plan D? Hopeful people anticipate obstacles, both internal and external. Research by Professor Gabriel Oettingen shows that when people visualize the obstacles and make concrete plans about how to deal with them, they are more likely to reach their goals. This technique is called mental contrasting with implementation intentions. By making concrete plans, we can address our obstacles and gain energy to take action. Sometimes there are ways around obstacles, and sometimes you just need to push through. What are obstacles that may hold you back? Think of ones that are both within you and ones that are external. What is one action you could take to overcome that obstacle? If happens, then I will. Oftentimes, when we are struggling in our goal pursuit, it is a sign that we're doing something new. Research has shown that the brain is similar to a muscle. The more you use it, the smarter you become. So struggling can actually mean that you're learning. However, make sure that you're evaluating the pathway you're taking and consider other ways to reach your goals. If you find yourself losing passion, or it seems like you exhausted all pathways, you may consider looking for alternative goals, and you can use this process again to increase the chances of reaching your next goal. So now that you have identified a goal and multiple pathways to reach it, what is your next step? And when will you take it?
Thank you for taking
The
time to watch
purpose of
this.
this video
To watch that earlier video. And in summary, the video is guiding us that when we talk about hope, it has these four subcomponents: goals, agency, pathway, and the video is silent about relationship. But relationship is the fourth component of hope, and that's the scientific understanding of hope. So and that way, we will know it's practical to know what hope is. This gives us what the model of hope is about, and it's telling us that to be hopeful, then we need to be able to bring out these four components in understanding hope, and that way we can guide people to be able to use this so that this technique we use will be helpful for them to be able to enhance their hope and be able to keep improving in the suffering and reduce the suffering in the process. So goal is the desired outcome or the target that the hope is directed towards. And in trauma, it will be about relieving the suffering. And there may be other targets that will be there, but the individual and our interaction and assessment will help to guide this. The next will be motivations, which are the inner drive or reasons that fuel the pursuit of the goals. And that motivation usually is tied to what the agency is about. Talking about how as the what is motivating me, what is the possibility I have driving me, the possibility mindset that this is feasible, and what do I need to do. That's aspect of I need to take care of myself so that I can get the required energy that I need to push this motivation is essential. And having know what to do and motivating oneself is not enough in hope. We also need to identify what are the paths I need to move. These are the paths that I need to take my steps upon. There may be obstacles that may block that path. What do I need to do to overcome those obstacles? And that path will be there. And the fourth aspect, which the video is silent about, is relationship. And here it's talking that relationship is very essential because that's the connection with the other that support and help us to sustain hope. And this is very vital that when you provide this model, then it will be easier to be able to use the techniques that are outlined in hope enhancement strategies so that the individual will be able to use it effectively. Another thing that is very essential is the next thing when it comes to understanding the phenomena of hope, and that is this model of hope. Is to another the hope as a power that moves us towards healing. So we are not just telling or talking about those four components. We are telling us that when we can identify that, we can use it well, we can get the right people on the pathway or with us, or that will meet that will help us along the way to move that pathway, then that is the power of the hope. And as we are taking the step, it's going to help us to keep healing. And that willpower, that motivation, that agency, we keep nurturing it. It will help us to get to that valued hope. And that is the power of hope that help to kickstart our human adaptation. And that is central to all the psychotherapeutic changes, whether it is medically induced through pharmacotherapy, that's through medication, or medically induced through psychotherapeutic attempts. This will help to power that and it will trigger and maintain the recovery as the individual start healing. And when the individual heal, it will help to keep boosting resilience so that to prevent and limit relapse or reoccurrence of the individual to this back to the suffering state. So this is why hope is very essential and why we are emphasizing and why it's one of the core skills that this very short therapy is essential with. And it's one of those things that can easily be lost in psychological suffering, that's trauma. And the hope of that power is very essential because it focuses on the following. It clarify and help to attain the goals. It instill the motivation. It improve mood, increases planning skills, improve our sleeps. It identify workable goals that we can attain and help us to find ways to reach the target despite that the obstacles that will be on the way. And it can inculcate positive self-talk to motivate goal accomplishment in the process. So if you understand what the scientific uh, nuances of what hope is about, then let's look at it. How do we understand it that when hope escape us? We have tried in the beginning to look about the common expressions of hope, so that as the people are expressing it, then we'll be able to look at it. But I've also talked about the practice, or we practice about what are the expressions when people cry for hope, and what are the expressions when people hold on to hope. So this is putting all together and tell us that from the scientific understanding of hope, that hope is very helpful and it will make us unable to imagine a path to a better future when it escapes us, when the traumatic suffering is there. And that's why that model is very essential. So that when the individual can understand what the model is, then we start seeing it to that yes, that because of loss of hope as a result of this traumatic suffering, then we cannot imagine a path that we can we can start healing. We cannot imagine a path that will start recovering, and we cannot imagine a path that will become resilient despite the suffering that has occurred. So this is very important, and that's why when hope escape us, it's very important for us to look about it. And when it happens like this, these are the way it presents. It hinders setting clear desired goals. So those positive goals that I want to do, those approaches or reaching out for sustaining and furthering desired goal outcomes. When hope escape us, it blocks that. It does not make us to consider that. And when it's there, it keep pushing those negative aspects that we pray or putting off unwanted harms of the goal outcome. It will keep promoting us not to do what is needed to, to be able to overcome this. So in order for us to be able to help the individual to not to lose hope again, then we have to let them know that when hope escape, it did this. And we can overcome it through this positive approach by reaching out for help, using our relationship, the understanding we have, having a clear desired goal, and we use the power of hope to boost ourselves forward. Or we can see how to prevent us dwelling on that negative by preventing or putting off those unwanted harms of the goal outcome. That by that way, we're helping the individual to overcome the hindrance, the obstacle that the lack of hope is, and that way we start boosting the hope. Another way when hope escape is to become like this, to distort our way of thinking. And when it distorts our way of thinking, then it distorts the path we will take because that part is also in our mindset, and, and then we move and we leave it to take it to behavioral. And when that is distorted, then we'll not be able to find the path to take, and that way we cannot identify it and we cannot move to success. We cannot move to healing. Another way when hope escape is to drain the mental energy that's required to achieve the set goals. And this can come in some of those things we have talked about in the earlier aspects of it, in understanding psychological trauma and in different windows. And if you remember the model we gave about the verbally accessible memories and about the situational accessible memory, how the two work together, how this continues to drain our mental energy. It deprives ability for us to be able to appreciate the value of self-care. And when all these are there, it keeps hindering and limiting ability to grow. And it also add more a destroy relationship essential to build that will help to fuel and sustain hope. And these are ways that loss of hope occur and that keep perpetuating the suffering of from the event, the psychological traumatic event that leads to this suffering that called the psychological trauma. So it's important for us to be able to appreciate this aspect of it. So from here, we'll also try to look at it that how does trauma influences hope? And that way, you start appreciating that this is some of the way trauma can influence hope. And this understanding should help us to see that when there's psychological trauma, the phenomenology tells us that it has some meaning for us. And that meaning has a way of interacting with hope. And if that interaction depletes hope, it brings pain and ultimately leads to the suffering, which is the psychological trauma. And if that interaction improves the meaning of the hope, the meaning that comes with hope is improved, and through that model of hope, then it brings about healing, and then it leads towards recovery. And these are the things that is what essentially looking at it. Those four things we identified earlier on can also fit into this, and one of the things that in order for us to improve hope is that we have to learn to modify the nature of goals. And this way we have to help people to know that yes, when there's loss of hope, it brings about what is called the fixed mindset, where the individual have a pre-designed mind that I cannot get over this. There's nothing I can do. Everything is doomed. And that is talking about people crying for hope that are created with the fixed mindset. But when we help them to know that no, the growth mindset will come, but we need to work towards that. We need to grow it. And that's why it's a growth mindset. It's not something that we feel that if I can't deal with it now, then I can never deal with it again and I have succumbed to that. No, it's telling us that there are things we can deal with, and by dealing with that, then we keep growing and things will become, and that is by a design that we need to make, and that will help us to see that we change that fixed mindset of hopelessness to the growth mindset of hopefulness, and we started growing the hope. And that way, it will help us to achieve that by setting the right kind of goal, so that when we do it the right way, it will change the mindset for us. Another thing to look at is by stressing the thinking pathway and patterns. It's very essential because as well as we are developing the growth mindset, then we need know that we are going to work on the pathway. And without stressing that their taking pathway is very important, because those are some of them we cover in when the early morning understanding trauma, when we talk about the trauma taking pattern. If we cannot identify them, then they will keep frustrating the possibility mindset, keep fixing the mind that nothing can be done. And the growth mindset we are trying to then will not be able to overcome it. And it's very important we appreciate that. And that's also further expressed in the verbally accessible memory and the situational accessible memory. And three, it will by draining the willpower with negative preoccupations. And that is another way hope is lost and suffering keep perpetuating. And when psychotrauma drains the willpower, drains the motivation of the individual, robs the individual to understand that there's need for self-care, not just to believe, but there's need for self-care to move and do, then that potentiates the negative thinking pattern that is called brooding. And when brooding mindset is there, then the individual will keep draining all the remaining hope, all the vital mindset needed to grow will continue to be drained. The fixed mindset will be there, and the individual find himself trapped or enslaved in his own prison of mind as a result of the traumatic suffering. And it also strains relationships. And once those relationships are saved, we keep keeping more to ourselves without appreciating what's the value of others, what others are bringing. And once we cannot appreciate what others will help us, we cannot be able to pinpoint how others will help us, then the traumatic event keeps winning. And that will also further challenges the belief in the spiritual component of it. And people might have spiritual crisis when you say, why me God? Or I don't believe in you, God again. Or say, why did they do this to me in the universe? And things like that that people may express in the modern age. But this is very important for us to be able to appreciate that trauma influence hope by modifying the goals that we set, by stressing the way we think, by draining the willpower and the motivation of the individual, and by straining the relationship. And this we need to do, and that is how the meaning from trauma come to influence hope. And once that goes on the negative aspect of it, it brings about pain and leads to suffering. But when that comes on the good aspect of it, by bringing about growth mindset, by helping us to know that obstacles will come and we need to prepare uh, solutions to it, by bringing about problem solving skills to bear, then it helps us to keep appreciating that we are moving towards healing. By potentiating that we need to stop ruminating in the negative brooding that will keep cocooning us. By moving us towards the reflective thinking pattern, then we'll be moving towards healing. And by appreciating that relationship is not just tied to ourselves only now, we need to look at those good others that surround us, and we need to reach out to them and help us to tell them. And that is also telling the story hope, of our hope that is present, and also appreciating our spirituality. So that is taking us towards recovery. So how can we enhance hope? And hope enhancement is about how we can foster out through our culturally relational strategies that will help to promote resilience and ensure the goal that is set is attained. These are some of the strategies that have been outlined that can be used to help us to enhance hope. Because we have said that when trauma occurs, it can drain hope. And when hope is drained, it leads to pain and ultimately suffering comes, which causes psychological trauma, which called the trauma. That's the wound that follows the traumatic event. So what when the hope is drained, how can we enhance it? how can we bring about it? And these are some of the strategies we're doing. That we'll talk about hope finding, hope bonding, hope enhancing, hope reminding, and hope sustaining. What is about hope finding? These are how we can discover the sources of hope that we have. And it's very important because if we cannot get it, then it becomes challenging for us. And these are some of the things we can use as therapists to help the client to be able to understand that yes, there'll be hope. And we can get it through some narrative based exploration. We can use common folk tales like the Arabian Nights story or some other African griot stories. Or, and all this will help to inspire hope. And for instance, the Arabian Nights story, we'll be able to help them tell it's about the story of a king that lost hope and he ends up doing the wrong thing by killing innocent people. And the therapist is about the queen that come forward, that I'll become the queen, the lady that come, I'll become the queen, and I have to put it for, and that is the therapist. The lady that come forward that become the queen was able to help the king to recover, to rediscover hope, grow in hope, and become recover from the agony that he go through, from the burden that he has. And that helped the king to it. And it took the queen as a therapist almost more than 3 years to be able to achieve this. And that is very vital to know because that's the story behind the story of the Arabian Nights. Those beautiful stories that were told are stories that are what the therapy session that the queen gave. But why did the queen have to devise that? Because the queen is a therapist and it has to use the creativity of being therapists to achieve this. So we can help people to find hope by using narrative-based exploration. And this will be very helpful when we know there are many cultural folklore that we have. There are many cultural folklore stories that will help the individual that will be might be relevant to the suffering, to the trauma of the individual at that time. And when we use that, the individual can start seeing, yeah, somebody go through this and they recover. And that is very important for us to do. Another thing that maybe do to help people to find out is by asking them to practice reflective exercises. And this come in the popular journaling or guided imagery on past successes and resilience. And this will come that how have you managed, have you been successful about something before in the past years? Tell us about those success stories. How did it go? What did you get from it? So all those things are put into it. And that way, they're practicing that by writing them down, by reflecting upon it. And the individual will start saying, yeah, I've overcome obstacles before in life. I've overcome loss of hope before in life. And I've overcome the pain and suffering for come as a result of traumatic events in the past. So these two can become, and that way it becomes universal and we can adapt it to the personal experiences of the and the individual can be able to use that to move forward. Another way is to use cultural storytelling cycles where people gathered like the concept of the African night tales, the tales by the moonlight. They have therapeutic value. It helps the people in the village to come together to be able to find way to improve their hope, to improve the the resilience they have to tell them that they are all going to survive despite the many uncertainties that surround them. And that one will align with our collectivistic value that know that we are together. We are not just individual living alone. And the concept of Ubuntu from South Africa help to reflect this. And in our own culture, we have things like that. What we may talk about from the Yoruba culture, we talk about Omoluabi, or in the outside we talk about the concept of Motun Kriki and things like that. They are abound in all the culture across Nigeria. The next concept or the next strategy to use to enhance is what is called hope bonding. That is how we can build trust and connection. And this will help, especially when it comes to forming relationship, blissful, helpful relationship for the clients in order to so because whenever they can discover hope, we have to find a way to help them stay with the hope and we can bond them with the hope so that that will not leave them. That will not become something that is fleeting, but that will become something that will stay more with them. And by that staying more, it helps them to heal, it relieves the pain, and they move towards recovery. And one of the major concepts we know in psychotherapy general is the concept of therapeutic alliance. We know the presence of therapeutic alliance, the right therapeutic alliance, foster trust, and leading to warmth. And this is usually accomplished through the practice of way we do. We all learn to speak as growing up, but we forget the capacity to listen. And often therapy help call us back and say, no, when we're in therapy, we learn to listen. We should stop being those health practitioners that the person in front of us, before they finish telling us the story of their suffering, we have tell them this is what you should do, that's what you should not do. No, that is advice. We are not doing therapy. So active listening will help us to be able to do this, to build that therapeutic alliance. And the cultural humility is very essential. The more cultured we are, that we're humble with it and we're able to tuned the patient to the cultural perspective, the cultural context of the individual, then we are further strengthening therapeutic alliance. And this we have discussed under the the foundation skills that we talk about. And that foundation skill, which is our module 2 that we talk about, we talk about engagement strategies. And this is further emphasizing it. Now, if we do it well, we're helping to bond with the patient, and that trust and connection that is built, the hope we're building will help that to grow and lead to that goal. And this have a universal and emphasizes how we use empathy, which is very important. And it tells us that empathy is not the cognitive one only in this situation. Where the individual just know that when people are crying, this is what I'm expected to do. But it also entails the emotional empathy, where the individual can feel the pain of the other person and he knows what it is to be in the shoe of that person. And so people can now spend the genuineness of this therapist that is trying to help me. And so it's not about the therapist just faking it. So in this case, faking it you make it will not be helpful. You are not going to fake it, but you are going to feel it. And that way the patient can know that I'm in a safe place. And now I'm going to start healing from this safe space. So therapeutic analysis is very important. Culturally adapted communication is also very important. The more we know about proverbs or metaphors is very important. And the more we utilize it, it will help us in our context to do. And the first task I've talked about what that's our traditional African stories about, and that will help us. And a lot of proverbs, metaphors are also used there, and that help us to see the value of what communal life is, and that will help to enhance the relatability to different diverse culture, and that multicultural sense that will bring that will help the patient to be able to live in his or her own cultural context will help to adapt to what you are doing. And the concept, if you remember, that we call accommodation in those basic skills that is needed will be practiced so that to tune the person's suffering within the culture of the individual so that that way we help the individual to grow. And then we have to work together to have a collaborative goal setting. We don't just let goal setting just to be frivolous. We make sure that the goal is have those characteristics of what we call smart, and I'm sure we know about setting smart goal. So and that way the goal become not only achievable, it become culturally meaningful, it will become reliable, it will have time specificity because there is time for goals to grow. And that way the individual will not think that I'm just be giving false hope that I cannot eat. No, I'll be giving realistic hope that I need time to grow and these are the tools I need to grow it. And that's where the scientific model is important and it helps them to focus on their sources of support that is needed, on the sources of buffer that is needed, and how the family and community will help them to move. And where those is, such is lacking, how the group might be helpful, how where we get other sources of support will be helpful so that this individual can bound to hope. After bounding to hope, we can try to enhance the hope by sustaining the motivations and the pathway in the hope model. And the motivations are talking about the willpower of the individual. And that way we can achieve this by doing goal visualization planning, so that way we know I want to move this way, then I need to be able to visualize where I want to do. And this will entail concept like what possible but be able to think about solving this problem. And that way we can adapt it to the cultural context of the individual. We come to about the thinking pathways where we can break down the goals into simpler steps to see that, and those steps will be linked so that the individual can identify, oh, I can, this is not just for me to get there, but these are the several steps I will take that I link with one another that will help me to get to where I'm going. And this have universal practical approach to how we can make our thinking mindset in the willpower, in the motivation that we have to be able to move toward it. And we take that in the concept of hope, that we should anticipate that there may be obstacles. And when there's there, we should plan what we need to use to overcome. And that's why part of the skills we learn is about problem solving skills, so that we can use it. It can be any therapeutically based skills to help address the obstacles. And anyone that will learn will be of value here. So that when we use it, problem solving skills, solution focused therapy, although anyone will learn, will help us to be able to overcome obstacles that are there. And this will be helpful, and it will be tuned to the diversity of what is specific to the individual that's with us, culturally speaking. And then we also make sure that things are culturally relevant for the individual, so that whatever goals that the individual have will make it not only to be motivating, but to be tied to either a spiritual communal value the individual have. In Nigeria, people talk about family honor, and that is a good communal value. That's a good spiritual basis that whatever the individual is trying to enhance, once it's tied to a spiritual value, then it becomes more easier for the individual to want to do it. He has his own motivator for doing that, that rather than to look that and limit it only to such. And that will help the individual to align with cultural motivators that will abound. Then the individual will not need just any the individual will not need just any um, how will I put it, tangible motivators, but intangible motivators will also be helpful for the individual to grow. So we come to, having done the first three skills, we can also look how can we enhance hope. And hope enhancing is very by building positive momentum. And these are things that can be done in open by doing hope modeling. And that way we can build it by sharing collected positive news of being a survivor with with the patient. We can boost the optimism or closure of future focus. We can help them to identify joys and successes in life. And that way we celebrate together with them in session, together as a group in session. The dyadic, the patient therapist engagement, they can help them celebrate it. And that way the patients or the clients will be able to see that I've made some achievement and it's worth celebrating about. Then also when we have done this, we keep reminding them of hope because it will help to reinforce that hopeful thinking pattern that is there for the individual. And this will entail hopeful cognition practice, like as one of the strategies that we use. And this hope cognition practice will entail using affirmation, gratitude exercises, or hope focused apps to be able to attain this. This may also entail universal adaptable to local languages to be able to achieve this. Another way to up reminding is to schedule check-ins, which entail text reminders or brief sessions to track progress, multilingual digital tools for accessibility. Hope rituals will also be used, like prayers, meditation, or community ceremonies. This is merging in Native American communities that align with spiritual and cultural practices. Progress monitoring will also be essential to include in this, where we have to review the goals that have been achieved, the progress made in that goal, so that we can celebrate every small wins that are there. And this is very important in our cultural context, so that people can appreciate that for every little step I've taken, that wins for me, and we need to help them celebrate it so that way it reminds them, it stays with them, and to reinforce the hopeful thinking pattern. And when we have helped to remind them, we will find a way to help them sustain it And that way, it will help to become part and parcel of their daily living and part parcel of the strategy they use for continuing to carry out every day-to-day activities, tasks, and moving forward and living in hope and reducing the suffering and continue to recover more and in the process building resilience. And this can be achieved through the following strategy. Social support networks, build and strengthen family, friend, or community support, which are very important. Hope role models will connect the client with culturally relevant mentors and leaders in the community that will help to serve as role model that yes, they have gone through crisis, they survived it, and it shows that they too, the clients who can also do this. We can get from environmental cues where we can get inspirational quotes, arts, or sound therapy to create hope inducing spaces so that way the individual can keep having contact, not only reminding, but that will help to sustain the hope. And this should be culturally relevant and be of significance to the individual. And we should culturally tailor all this so that it can help boost the resilience of the leader and the staff continue to serve as resilience training. And we can engage them to join some workshop on mindfulness or stress management. And this should be aligned with the cultural practice of the individual. And some of what this also entails is to keep teaching them how to keep using grounding, one of the techniques we have emphasized. And this is very vital to do. Cultural considerations in tailoring hope strategies to cultural context are very important and vital. And this will tell us that whenever we are trying to enhance the hope of individuals using the hope model, we should help them to know that there's a difference between the individuality and collectivity understanding and context for them. And this approach helps us to emphasize personal agency in individuality culture that is more emphasized than compared to community goals in collective culture. And this is very important. So our cultural context is very vital for us to know that what we do, we look at how the individual share in the individuality versus the collectivistic worldview. And this will be taken to help the individual to grow and move. We also look at the language and accessibility, where we use culturally, linguistically appropriate materials to help the individual, and that we can provide intervention in local languages and dialects, so that when all this come, we can help them to see that yes, what we're practicing is of value to them, culturally speaking. And we can also look at how the spiritual and religious integration can work in this by incorporating relevant spiritual practices like prayers, rituals, and all this will be put together to show us that spiritual intervention are of value in this. So lastly, one of the things I want us to look at, which after watching this video is for us to look at this, that we need to find way to practice hope and build using hope techniques to build hope and to counter emotional resilience or insight bias, which are one of the challenging thinking pattern that we'll talk about. So hope narratives can be used as one of those tools that we can tell me about a time you overcome a difficulty, but this is before this event. What did that show you about you? And this will help them to know, oh, that maladaptive thinking pattern that I have, I can counter it based on what I've accomplished in the past. Another practice you can use to form what we call the hope kit, a physical or digital collection of letters, photos, sounds, music, and objects that remind the client of their strength, love, and past possession. This can be family photos. This can be photos of people that are inspired. This can be quotation of inspiration. All this will be helpful so that when the individual have it, whenever this training comes down, the individual can look at it and use it to move. Then you can also work using scaling question to help gauge how the individual is. And we can tell on a scale of 1 to 10, how hopeful are you that things can improve? What will it take to move from 3 to 4 based on the response? Make hope concrete and manageable. And this way, we are telling them that we are not just looking at hope as an abstract thought, we are quantifying it, we are making it concrete, and it's something that is workable, that is doable. And we can also make them to practice future projection, that we can ask them to imagine yourself a year from now, coping well. What are you doing? We ask them. what did you do to get there? And this way, we are helping them to create a new positive pathway towards attaining what hope is about. And that will go. So at this point, I would thank you for being patient and watching all this. And please, be, uh, from this, we'll go to the next video about wisdom enhancement, and we can utilize that to move. Thank you very much. You have a lovely day.